and I want to introduce our next speaker. He works with the Sustainable Energy Group. And again, this is really where the rubber hits the road. We're not just here for information, but to showcase and highlight the people who are bringing solutions to our community. So from the Sustainable Energy Group, I want to introduce Penn. I can't see your name tag. Penn Martin. Nice round of applause.
Thanks, Michael. Hi, folks. I've been really touched here today listening to the music and amazing songs, and also listening to the other presenters. I'm finding how much I have in common with them, actually. You were up in Mount Shasta just, last week? I lived there for 12 years, 5 of it in a cabin off the grid, 4,700 feet up on the side of the mountain. And that experience is what got me started on this arc towards sustainability, because I found myself in heaven. I was literally surrounded by the most beautiful place I'd ever seen. And the thing that struck me more than anything about it was, how do I take care of this? How do I step up as a steward and take my responsibility for the little piece that I have in this, because I'm connected to all of it. There's threads running through that mountain, streams coming down off the mountain, the source of the Sacramento River up there. And I end up finding myself down here at the other end of the Sacramento, down toward the Delta, and connected by those threads to other people. And the lessons that I learned in Shasta were a lot about how vertical it is, how much you can actually connect with spirit in a place like that. But what I found down here was that there's a place where I can actually apply that and connect with the people together horizontally through the rivers of gold, the rivers of water that connect us, that are running through these foothills, where we can actually do things together. And so my career in renewable energy is a direct outgrowth of that, because we put boots on the roof. We implement practical solutions that help people act locally about these global issues that we're facing together. I'm going to tell a joke, and this goes back to what you were talking about in relation to Fukushima, because it also touched my heart really, really deeply, what's happening with the oceans right now. And the joke is, what do you call a hazardous waste spill at a solar power plant? Well, it's a sunny day, right? Because there's just all that juicy juice pouring out of the sky that's absolutely clean, that can light this place up. And it's not nuclear waste. It's not tons of loss through the transmission lines, getting that power from some central generating plant to your roof, when you can generate it on the roof of your business, on the roof of your home, in your backyard, very directly, very efficiently, right where you live or work. And it's just a beautifully elegant, economical solution. Because economy is really ecology. When we look to the things that we want to model, I look to nature. Because if you want to talk about resiliency, the planet's been around for billions of years, apparently, and it's been doing its thing, and we may be a little latecomer, little blip at the end of this thing, but if we have something to learn from anything, we can learn from the planet, and we can learn from nature and the systems that nature has put in place. And so when I consider resiliency, I look at, are the systems that we are implementing as humans, are they sustainable? Are they organically sustainable in a way that requires minimal input of energy, in a way that, like with sunlight, it's immediately available. It doesn't really take a lot to get it, right? And so not only does the system have to be organically sustainable, but can it be stable? Right? Does it actually have the ability to last as a stable platform for a long time? And so in relation to that, with renewable energy, with solar, for example, I take my smartphone. I know I'm going to have to throw that thing away 3 years from now, because it's just planned obsolescence, right? The thing's going to outgrow itself in a very, very short lifetime. Whereas with the solar electric systems that we're putting in, 25 years, easily. They're built to last. A solar panel is a smart rock. It's going to sit there with no moving parts and make power for 25 years minimum as a really stable platform. Systems, in order to be resilient, also have to be adaptive. So, yeah, you can be stable, right? But what good does that do you if you're just plodding along like a bull with blinders on and you're completely oblivious to the world around you and you have no ability to adapt? And I definitely don't get bored working in renewable energy. It's the most dynamic industry I've ever had the privilege to, be experienced in my life, because it's always changing. It's always adapting. It's always responding to innovations in new technology, and it's responding to the demands and the needs that society is asking for in relation to what are we going to do with energy. I remember when I got into this back in 2007, when I was living in Mount Shasta, solar was, the wholesale price of solar, just the panel itself, was more expensive than the fully installed retail price of a system on your home now. Completely installed retail is significantly less expensive than what I could buy a panel for by itself wholesale. And that's a function of the adaptation of the technology and the ingenuity of the engineers and the response of the economic marketplace to the demand that the world is creating for clean, inexpensive, efficient power. And we have the ability to do it. We're not limited by the technology right now. It's not a technological paradigm shift that needs to happen. It's a social paradigm shift. It's our willingness as individuals to step up and to take responsibility to implement that, which we can do. And the solutions are right there. I was really heartened by David, as a member of the Citizens Climate Lobby, to hear what's happening on the policy level, to hear that bridges are being built between red and blue. Because it's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's just common sense. It's really just common sense. I remember in 2001, I founded a renewable energy nonprofit called Shasta Energy Group up in Mount Shasta. And we were about education. We were very early on, teaching people about these new things. And I remember people were talking about alternative energy. And that was this buzzword that we had to describe what it was that we were all about and what we were trying to encourage people to learn about and to do. And I was going, how can it be alternative when the prime mover of almost all the energy in the whole solar system is the sun? All we're doing is just cutting out the middleman, right? It's just a direct pipeline straight back to the source. So there's nothing alternative about it. It's just common sense. And it's our ability to directly enact those solutions practically today in our lives, because we really don't have any time to waste. If you read the climate action reports, if you read the stuff that's coming from the IPCC, it's almost like it's too late. And I'm not the kind of person that wants to bury my head in the sand and just go, well, we can't do anything about it. Let's just throw our arms up and walk away, because that doesn't help anybody. But what we can do is we can work together to take action. We can build community structures that allow us to empower ourselves to make the choices that we want to make in relation to power. There's been a lot of talk lately about the grid, and everybody's like pointing at the campfire and pointing at the Tubbs fire last year in Santa Rosa, and it's really, really easy to villainize PG&E, and the investor-owned utilities. But that again, is just creating a wall between me and somebody else that I'm seeing as other. And the reality is that, decades and decades and decades ago, these people stepped up and built the grid. And they own the grid. And there might have been better ways that it could have been done. Maybe we could have put all the power lines underground if we'd been willing to spend the money to do that. And as it is, trees are blowing into them and sparks are flying and houses are burning down and people are dying. And yeah, it's tragic, right? But in my mind, the way out of that isn't to villainize the utility companies and go, you bad utility companies, you killed people. Well, they did what they could. And yes, it's a resource extraction, commodities-based, profit-driven paradigm that is shifting. That's where we've come from. But to walk away from it and go, well, I don't need a grid. I can flip the switch and I can be off grid, and I can sit here with my battery bank in my cabin and turn my back on the world. That works to a certain point. And from a practical level, if you want to spend 1.5 times to twice as much for your renewable energy system, yeah, you can put in a battery bank on an individual level. You can do anything if you want to throw enough money at it. But maybe a more inclusive solution would be to work with the utilities from a lobbying point of view, from a policy point of view, and try to steer them toward something maybe like SMUD, Sacramento Municipal Utility District, which is a fantastic model of what a utility can be, where it's actually responsive to the people and where it's interacting with the people on the level of service rather than profit-driven motives and corporate greed. And I believe there's a way to get there. And I believe that it's not a one solution situation where the only way to do it is to stay grid tied. There are going to be people that are going to want to flip that switch. There are going to be people that it costs $70,000 just to get a power pole to your house so that you can set a meter. And what's happening in those situations, and with people who the importance of comfort, the importance of security, the importance of having power and being able to be resilient when the grid is down, because it's going to happen. We can implement battery solutions, but the most effective battery solutions right now in relation to resilience are happening on the utility scale. Like what I was saying in relation to your question. We're implementing gigantic battery banks right now on the utility scale that are stabilizing the grid. They're allowing us to provide what's called base load supply in relation to the variability of the distributed generation resources that we're putting on the grid, like solar and wind. Hydro is another solution, as Don had mentioned. Right now, one of the local entities, Nevada Irrigation District, has a bunch of hydro, and they have power purchase agreements that are coming up for expiration with PG&E, and they're looking for solutions as to what to do with that power. And it may be that they can create an off-taker with that power through a community-based organization such as Community Choice Aggregation here in Nevada County. And there are local working groups that are looking at how we might be able to implement that. So there's a possibility there where we can take the grid and we can make it regional. But it also comes back to people. I've seen community choice aggregation entities that are not that different, frankly, than the utility that they're replacing on the generation side. The renewable mix isn't that much better. The prices may be marginally cheaper. It's still very, very profit driven. So if we're going to create those, my suggestion would be, well, how can we do that in a way that reflects our values? How can we get together and organize and do that in a way that actually is an outgrowth of our community values that are saying, well, we want to do it by utilizing renewables. We want to do it by making decisions from a community level together where we're actually chipping into this and we're stepping up and going, yeah, this is what our utility is going to look like. So we have a choice there, and we're actually on the cusp of a lot of dynamic changes, in relation to the utilities, in relation to the grid, and in relation to the technology that's becoming available to us as our power mix goes. So there's a lot that we can do. I'm going to open up the floor to questions.
Yeah, I got a little bit of a question. This is sort of a bit out there, but I just think most of the technology you're talking about is basically already antiquated. And I think the future is really what people aren't thinking much about, and I don't know why they're not thinking about this, but it seems to be a very ridiculed subject, but it's the whole extraterrestrial question. There are already beings coming here. They already have power sources that are way beyond our understanding, and it has actually been developed and very superly suppressed by our own government in some incidents. Like Tesla had it. J.P. Morgan shut them down because they want to sell oil. This is what's polluted our planet. But nobody's talking about it, and I'm thinking about it. I've investigated this, and I'm pretty sure it's real. There is a real zero-point energy that actually could save our asses more than solar or anything else, but nobody's talking much about it. So I just want to bring that subject up and just say, why aren't we talking about it, and why aren't we demanding to have it? Because it is there, And people have been killed for trying to bring this out because they don't want, there's certain people that want to have their power, you know, the elite, the 3% that have all the money, they want to keep their power. They don't want us to have freedom and free energy. They want to keep controlling us. So when are we going to stand up and fight for this and become aware of this in a more grand, you know, universal level? That's my question for you.
Sure.
All right.
Well, those are some really big topics.
Yeah.
And I have some personal history in relation to this. As somebody with an engineering background from MIT, where I went for a couple of years, when I was living in Mount Shasta, I researched those topics very, very deeply. I was looking to people like Stan Myers, Puharich, and what I was really, really interested in is how do you take the energy in a car and generate energy in the car while you're driving it from water, because you can use electrolysis, blah, 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 blah. There's also harmonics, there's Tesla, there's quote unquote free energy. And I looked really deeply into this myself. And what I found, again, it wasn't a technological paradigm shift, because the technology is there, right? It may be very, very esoteric technology that not a lot of people are going to understand, but it's harmonics and the technology is there. And what it actually was a social paradigm shift. And the lesson that I got really strong and clear, that was the best application that I could do for my energy, was to help people take the very next step solution and just go a little bit down the road towards solar, right? Toward something which, I mean, right now in California, we're only at about 6% renewable penetration as far as the ratepayers go in California. So there's, you know, maybe a third of the people that are left can't do solar because it doesn't make sense in their house or whatever, right? But there's still, you know, 60% of the people that can take something that's very, very easily implemented and understood, compared to something that's very, very exotic. And so that was just my process. And I can't really answer your question from the standpoint
the
of
logical step that we can do right now.
Exactly. That was the point that I was
there's other
getting to.
alternatives that we should be thinking about.
And they're way out the road, and maybe we'll get there. But I think it's a social paradigm shift as much as anything.
I'd love to talk to you more about this.
Sure, David.
Just a real quick question. What would you say is the best way for our society to increase the research into new renewable energy technologies?
Funding. Yeah, it really comes down to funding. You know, we've been supporting the oil and gas industry, the nuclear industry, all kinds of other technology development through R&D funding for decades and decades and decades. Solar cells were invented in the United States at Bell Labs in the 1950s, and I keep, you know, thinking, wow, there's not much more that we can do, and I keep getting amazed by how much further they can go. And it's just a question of funding. It's a question of taking policy and directing resources towards the R&D that needs to happen to further those. And the holy grail for us right now is actually storage. You know, we're making small incremental steps in inverter technology, in solar cell technology, but it's really actually storage.
On the storage issue, what are the economics really versus pump storage, where you're doing water pump storage versus battery storage
I can't speak to that directly because I don't have hard numbers. What I do know is that there are many different solutions, such as some of them that you've mentioned. You can put in gigantic flywheels. You can pump water up to a higher elevation, and you've just made a battery because it's going to flow back downhill. There are huge advances that are being made right now through technology innovation and economy of scale in relation to lithium-ion, lithium ferrous phosphate battery storage technologies, and they're being implemented widespread right now on the utility scale. It's still not economically viable on the residential scale, like it is on the utility scale, to put storage in your home. It's about where we were 10 years ago with the PV technology itself. If I'm adding storage to an existing solar generating plant at my home, for example, it's going to cost me about what solar alone did 10 years ago. Yeah. So that's where we're trying to get to next, and it's just a matter of economy of scale. It's a matter of time. It's a matter of continued innovation, and that's you know, the huge area of growth that we're experiencing right now in our industry. And I don't think we're quite there yet in terms of your ability to effectively and economically put it on your house, but it may not be far away.
Yeah, one of the things I've thought about looking into is what I could do pump storage in my house. I've got enough elevation change.
Sure.
That whether it would actually work, but some of the systems I looked at is too expensive.
A holding tank?
Yeah, put a holding tank
up on a hill
up at the
is a
very
battery.
top. Because In Nevada County, we got a lot of elevation change on a lot of properties, and there's potential. You know, one of the things I've thought about is whether the Centennial Dam everybody's against, but, you know, you could actually have 3 lakes in sequence that you could do a tremendous pump storage system.
Yeah.
And I know in L.A., I used to live in Santa Clarita and Castaic Lake and Pyramid Lake. That's an all pump storage system.
Yeah,
so
water up a hill is a battery.
It makes a very nice battery.
And then you've got water when the grid goes down.
And it's one of the ways to go.
All right, thank you so much.